All right, good afternoon, early evening, Facebook. My name is Anthony Frisina, founder of Above and Beyond, Bridging the Gap to Accessibility and Inclusion, and Director of Media Relations for the Ontario Disability Coalition. And once again, we are back for day two, two of National Accessibility Week, National Accessibility Week, and I am once again joined by Maddie Dever. Maddie, the floor is yours, my man, for the introduction.
Thank you. I am Maddie Dever. I'm an autistic adult and parent of 5 kids, of which 4 are also autistic. And I'm a spinal cord. I was injured in an accident and had a spinal cord injury. I'm a wheelchair user. I do a lot of advocacy in terms of trying to get people with disabilities to the table to be able to direct policy, to influence policy, to have our voices heard for when things are done for us. They need to be done with us. And I am part of CASDA, which is the Canadian Autism Spectrum Disorder Alliance, and ConnectWell Community Health, which is a CHC community health center in rural Eastern Ontario. And I'm really glad to be here, Anthony, and being able to witness your haircut today.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Sorry, I was just doing some things in the background here. Um, Thank you, Maddie. And we are talking social inclusion today as part of National Accessibility Week. And it's been an up and down kind of love-hate relationship with social inclusion. I mean, a lot of it is spent to the fact that, yeah, we can get to a place, albeit with the heartache and uh, be it with the heartache and difficulties with transit and transportation, getting from point A to point B. But then once we get there, Maddie, can we
Mm-hmm.
access what that structure, what that facility, what that
Mm-hmm.
building, what that service has to offer, inclusively, organically, with respect and our dignity? What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, I see a lot of accessible symbols used in my daily travels, and they all mean a different varying level of accessibility. I look at, sometimes there's a button that we can push that we can get into a door that doesn't open all the way. We get into, like, let's say it's an accessible bathroom. We can get in to the bathroom that has the accessible symbol on it, but the stall doesn't fit a wheelchair. Um, it's not enough for us to be able to get to a place to inside, but we need to be able to participate. And that means thinking through what are the barriers that might be in play, in terms of space, in terms of design, in terms of not just for people with mobility disabilities, but what are ways we can do to help people that have different obstacles to inclusion.
Yeah, absolutely. And you spoke to a lot of the bathroom, for example. Getting from point A to point B, getting into the building, accessing the building. It's challenging to say the least, and especially I'm gonna paint the picture here, Maddie, and speak to the fact where when, as a person who's a wheelchair user like yourself, as well as I am, having to enter the building by way of a different entrance.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean? Like, what does that say to you?
It means that um, our access was an afterthought. It means that we're making sure that the main entrance, the main foyer, and everything is is for everybody except those with mobility issues. But we're going to take care of them by giving them their own entrance. That's a special interest. I hate the word special when it comes to disabilities. I hate special needs and special education. It's not special. It's just needs. It's just, it's education. We need accommodations, but we don't need anything special uniquely for us. But it's not the word special is, I feel is a really, well, we'll talk about more on that when we talk about the language of inclusion. But yeah, it's when, I understand for old buildings let's say 20 years old and older, before we really started looking at, really tackling all of the isms in society. And like the last one we're tackling is ableism. But it's I can understand and accept that it will take time to shift things so that there is a universal access to buildings and to rooms and things like that. But new buildings, really, you're still giving us a special interest, a special entrance, not interest. Uh, it's the autistic part of me who loves the special interest. A special entrance, it feels like we've been tokenly accepted to participate, but we're not fully there. And usually, a quarter of the time, that special door is locked when the front door is wide open, and it drives me crazy.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, Maddie. Um, it really does speak to, and as you alluded to, give a little preview. We're going to be talking language later on in the week. It does speak to the fact that you don't belong here. We'll give you an entrance, but we're going to segregate you. We're gonna keep you away from the, and I say this with respect, the important people, because people with disabilities are not important. But again, we're going to talk about language and communication later on.
Yeah.
Now, uh, entering the building, Maddie, and you're navigating from the beginning of the entrance to the building, and then you want to go over there to service desk, whether you want to go to a facility like a common room. What's that like for you? What's that like for when once you get into a building? And before I get to that, Maddie, I just want to just get your perspective of, because you talked about the push button door operators.
Yeah.
What is your thought on like the fact that a lot of the times the push button door operators are hidden? A lot of the push button door operators, yeah, they're hidden, and they're also like there's a barrier to get to the push button door operator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know how many places I go into and there's a garbage can or a table in front of the button, and it's like, are you seriously, you've put a barrier in front of the barrier-free thing? Yeah, you're right. The other thing is it's a game of Where's Waldo in terms of trying to find the accessible button. When you know that there's a sign on the door saying caution, doors automatically open, but how? It's like, like I almost need to go to Hogwarts to learn the spell to open accessible doors. Accessible open doors. Unfortunately.
Hi there.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, Maddie. Sorry, distracted there for a second.
It's okay.
Yeah, and I also want to talk about the fact that push button door operators are not strategically placed in terms of the door that they connect that opens. I've seen push door operators, if there's this double doors, for example, and the push button door operator is on the right, and the right door of the two door opens, yeah, that's little AODA fail waiting to happen.
Yeah, and I'm autistic as well as in a wheelchair, so I'm very visual. So when there's a visual confusion, it can mess me up. Like I don't know how many Tim Hortons stack the buttons on top of each other, and they don't have an arrow. If you put an arrow on it on the button itself, it's a little confusing, but you can get to it. But it's laziness. Or or it's expediency for whoever's putting it together, because you only have to wire up one place instead of two. But it just creates this confusion of how to use it. Buttons aren't just for mobility users. They're also used by people who just there's a lot of reasons why accessibility buttons exist. And for some people who use them to guide themselves places, when they're not clearly pictured where it opens, it does lead to a lot of potential problems for the disabled user.
Yeah, and then not only that, Maddie, even the threshold, the lips to get from the accessible door openings are very much challenged, are very much difficult to navigate, especially if you're trying to navigate things with you. I mean,
Yeah.
like if you have like stuff that you're holding on to and you're trying to push your chair, you're trying to get through the door while you have things in your hand, and then having to navigate that lip. I mean, the evolution of
Yeah.
wheelchairs has been astronomical. Like, I mean, sport chairs, different kinds of chairs, but
yeah,
like just getting through that lip, getting through the doorway, like with all your faculties intact, and as well as all your
stuff. Yeah,
stuff, and just that's a challenge in and of itself. Now,
yeah.
okay, so going back to getting into the door, Maddie, navigating whatever service desk, navigating the wash facilities, the facility. What's that like for you?
So I'm gonna answer one thing that you mentioned right before this. So what do I expect as a person in a wheelchair when I see an accessible door, when I see an accessible symbol on a door and a button? I'm expecting that every part of the entrance into that place is accessible, which means it's a straight, easy roll in. I'm in a motorized wheelchair, so most of the time, and most of the time I can deal with slight variations, right? But when I'm in a manual wheelchair and I'm being pushed because I can't use my hands to do it, it's that little lip that you're talking about, that quarter inch, half inch. If it's not level, it's a real challenge, and it challenges the people that are trying to help me, making it harder for people to want to help me because they know it's going to be such a struggle. So my expectation when I see an accessible icon and a button is that it's an easy roll in, smooth. That is not what we're seeing some of the time, but it is definitely what I'm expecting. Now, when I go into a building, when I'm in a thing, I'm expecting, when we start with an accessible button outside, I'm expecting some level of accessibility inside as well. I'm expecting that at least the front desk has the ability for to see me, right? They need to be able to see me, so I'm rolling in there. And I'm like, hello, 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 and they see this big, tall person. Oh, I didn't see you there. I missed you.
Oh,
So
that's yeah.
I've had that a lot. It's like, hey, me, I'm here. They like wave and everything like that. So I'm expecting at least the front desk to have some part that makes it visible to see people in wheelchairs. And I'm expecting to at least see an accessible bathroom that's truly accessible. That's not what we usually find, though. We usually find that the door is the only thing that's accessible. All of the things inside require a lot of effort on our part, or pain, or somebody to assist us with those things. And in retail stores, you expect, once you're able to get in, that the aisles will be wide enough for you to traverse without hitting things and taking off all the merchandise on all the end caps. Again, that's not always the case, and it's not enough to get us in the door. It's not enough to get us in the door. We have to be able to participate inside. Now, I've been talking from a purely, business kind of thing, but even for in social outings and in different things, we need to talk about more than just getting there.
Yeah, we need to be able to access things the way anybody else could access, and we need to do that by going through the same entrance. We need to
Yes.
be able to be part of the solution, getting from point A to point B the same way as anybody else would. Utilizing an elevator or ramp. Stairs for many of us are kryptonite, so to speak. And
CRIP tonight.
I like to put that, buddy. Kryptonite. Okay, okay, that's gonna be a hashtag. That'll be part of that'll be part of a show later on in the week.
All
But
right.
that's great, Maddie. I want to use that. Um, but yeah, we need to be able to access what that building and what that service provides organically, with respect and with our dignity, like anybody else would. A lot of times it's swept under the rug, overlooked and overshadowed because it's not thought of holistically. It's not thought of from the beginning. And then, speaking to what we spoke about yesterday, Maddie, about retrofitting,
Mhm.
Then we get into the conversation of surrounding cost.
Yeah.
The conversation around, oh, it's too much to do it now. Well, you have to look at it from the fact that you didn't do it right in the first place, which is
Yeah.
why the cost is what it is.
Yeah, and I try to focus on, like, primarily we need to focus on everything new now. Everything, every new business, every new store, every new building, every new transportation system, every new shelter, everything from this point, right, needs to have, needs to be accessible. It needs to have an accessibility path, and it needs to have an accessibility policy of how how people can use their services, their building, whatever. That's like it doesn't make sense to keep having things inaccessible now. Like, when we know the issue, when we have the AODA, now going backwards and retrofitting, that's going to be a challenge, and we need to accept. We need people to at least have a plan, and then and actually start executing on a plan. So I'm like, things that were built 20 years ago and beyond. I totally understand how difficult it will be to retrofit. It still needs to be done. It still is important to be done. But I'm willing to give them more time. But buildings in the last 20 years and anything new, we really, poor. I'm not going to say it's not poor decision making, but or poor planning. It's just uh it's a bit ignorant, it's a bit remiss, it's a bit lazy to not do it. And we need to make sure that when these things are happening, and and people are building new things, that there's some way that when they're planning their accessibility, like, in order to get a building permit, you should have an accessibility permit as well, right? If you're going to build this, if you're going to retrofit this, if you're going to redesign this, how are you going to make it accessible, and how are you going to test that accessibility? I honestly think that anybody building anything should either hire somebody with lived experience of being disabled, or they should get a wheelchair and spend 2 weeks trying to navigate whatever they're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly, Maddie. And it's a lot of it, the retrofit, and I use that term very sheepishly. Uh, but now, when it comes to creating accessible environments, the intangible environments, there's so many people with disabilities with a keen eye on inclusion, with a keen eye on accessibility, with a keen eye on creating an environment that it's not just for people with disabilities, Maddie. It's an environment for everybody,
Absolutely.
and it's so simple. It's so simple to do. Now, talking on social inclusion as we are today, what's it like, Maddie, for you in the community, as Maddie Dever, going out and having conversations with people within Carlson Place, within your surrounding areas? What's it like when you are out and about in the environment?
I live in a rural town. The town was founded about 200 years ago. Many buildings are over 100 years old. Some, they're most of the buildings, I would say, are older than somewhere between 20 to 200 years old. The roads are, in sidewalks especially, are crap. But there are a few there are a few businesses that have put ramps out front. There are a few restaurants I can get into, and every time I get to a place where I can get in, I'm like so happy, and I definitely go to those businesses again and again and again, and not only just because I can, it's because I can. And the other businesses are challenging. And then in Carlton Place, they made a decision as where they're rebuilding their main street. They made the decision to raise the sidewalks at the same time, like raise the road and raise the sidewalks up, several inches, so that 80 to 90% of all the businesses will actually be level to the sidewalk instead of having a step or two steps, which is incredible. And I'm really glad they did that. Um, the other towns around me, like there's four main towns in our county, and there's one town, Perth, which is their roads and their sidewalks are beautiful. They're easy to traverse. They have some parks that are a little bit like some parks are easy to get to, and some parks are just not accessible. Um, but almost no business. I think I can count two that I can get into. And same thing in Smith Falls. Smith Falls, it can be a bit challenging too because there's it's a little bit more of a slope. So how do I feel? I don't feel fully part of the community. I really I see, at least in Carlton Place, the desire to change and try to find a way to move a historic town into the 2020s. But until it happens, I'm disconnected from. I can't do everything. I can't go everywhere. I can't. I can't participate in all activities, and that's hard for me. Because before my car accident, I could get to most things. I still had some mobility issues. I was in a cane for quite a while, but and sometimes a walker, but like going up steps wasn't challenging to me back then. But now it's there's so little that I can do. And I know in cities it's a bit different. Like when I go to Toronto, when I go to Ottawa, when I go to Montreal, it's like holy crap, I can do so many things. But I live in a rural community and I don't want to leave my rural community. I know other people with disabilities, they've had to. And that's a real systemic problem. Right. And I'm not saying that accessibility in the cities is great. I'm just saying in the rural communities, comparing it's so challenging.
Maddie, one of the things that you pointed out that I wanted to just kind of follow up with you. You talked about how they were raising the sidewalks up to the level where it eliminates the single step.
Mhm.
What does that do to curb cuts?
I know that they're going to grade them down. They're um I've been told that they've really taken into account wheelchairs in the redesign of the streets down of the main street. So but you've actually picked, I'm going to follow up on that because I want to doubly, triply, quadruply make sure. But they're also going to have bike lanes, and I'm probably going to want to be in the bike lanes for a lot of the time. I don't really like being on the sidewalks to travel. I really wish they would make sidewalks like they do bike paths and just have continuous concrete or continuous asphalt instead of these concrete blocks that go ba-thump, 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 and just every year they they warp so they're not level. Yeah,
Yeah. And okay, so then Maddie, the next question that I have is what's the social environment like for you?
it's so the last 3 years, the last 2 years, we've been in Zoom a lot. Everything's been in Zoom.
Yeah.
But I in the last month or two, I've begun to get out and try to do more things. Um, I I'm not sure I can answer that question yet because it's too. I mean, my issue, my large issue. Okay, it's a small town. There's three other towns, all about between 15 and 25 minutes from each other, and there's things going on that I'd like to participate in. There's no accessible transportation. There's no way for me to get there unless I go in a manual wheelchair and have somebody push me around, which, like, honestly, the moment that happens, when it's by necessity, I accept it, but it is really challenging for me to have to be pushed around places when I can get myself around in my motorized wheelchair. I mean, to me, that's part of social inclusion. That is a huge problem, and another major reason why people with disabilities leave these small towns and rural areas and go into cities, because transportation is, to be able to do things, you need to be able to get yourself to things. And so, like, there's three things. I guess there's three aspects of social inclusion: the getting there, the being there, the getting there, the getting in, and the being there. The getting there in my town, so I can do things in my town, but there's not a lot of things that I do. The things that I want to do are in the other towns, and like it's frustrating. Now, again, we're just coming out of, we're just starting to come out and do things. So, I'm not as fully engaged in activities in person yet in my small town. But from what I wanted to do, the transportation issue is just, and you can talk about transportation issues in urban areas. I'm sure you have a lot to say about that.
I do. We're gonna hold off on that conversation, but now, two things though, Maddie. You talked about the getting there, being there. Now, what about the community around you? What about the people, the citizens, the acceptance of Maddie
Yeah.
Dever?
I think that I'm quite well accepted. I think that acceptance is not an issue. I think people want to include people like myself, other autistics, other people with disabilities. I think sometimes, like, I have some town councilors that I talked about some of the barriers that I'm facing, and I mean, I definitely feel that there's a desire to change, desire to understand, like a shock that there's the issues, and then a desire to fix them. I think that the town wants to be inclusive. The town wants to have a place for everybody, but also feels the challenges of how to make that happen. Um, you know, the transportation issue, that's a jurisdiction and a budget issue. The they're dealing with to be able to get in things, at least on the main street, because that they made it a priority. And when they're rebuilding sidewalks and roads, they're trying to make accessibility a priority when they do that. So, like, there's a desire there, and it's when I participate in events, people are really receptive to hearing what I have to say, and just letting me participate. I have a lot of hope, but that's Carlton Place. I was at an event in Perth where when I was able to get there with my wheelchair, I went to it was a festival, and I was trying to get I needed to go to the washroom, and they have public washrooms, but the accessible one was broken. The other two were fine, but the other two had a step up, so there was no way to get in there. I mean, I had to go quite a bit out of the way to do that. And I talked to the town clerk, and we had a really good discussion about, I mean, she was embarrassed that this was the issue. And again, like, it wasn't a priority to fix, even though it's a priority. It sort of got pushed aside, and we'll get to it. And we talked about accessibility, and I talked about the fact that it's really frustrating that there's just 2, maybe 3 places in that whole town that I can get into. And she says, we have funding available for people to get ramps and to be able to, you know, make some accommodations. But and we keep telling the BIA, we keep putting it out to people, but no one's taking up on us. And we have this funding that we're just not using. It's an attitude. There's a there's an attitude like, well, you don't want to really change. We don't have to really put ourselves out, and that's not unusual to find in some of the smaller towns. Talking to some other folks, with disabilities in different other rural areas, there are some that are absolutely want to change, want to move forward, want to be inclusive, and are doing it as best as they can. If they had more funding, they would definitely do way more. But there's others that are just, it's like, it might be, the municipality might be on board for it, but the businesses just don't care. It's like, it's 2 to 3 years of just surviving, and they just, anything that gets in the way of just them doing what they've done. And what they don't see is, like, some of us, not me, have money to spend. I want to just be, I'm barely surviving. So, but some of us have money to spend. Just because we're disabled doesn't mean we're poor. I mean, many of us are, but not always. So when you build a ramp, first of all, we can get in. Second of all, seniors can get in. Third of all, parents with children in a stroller can get in. Doing things making accommodations for us also literally opens the door to a lot more people than just us.
Yeah, and that's the underlining message, Maddie, that needs to get across.
Yeah.
Now, in the communities, we talked about the environments, the buildings, and whatnot, getting included, feeling included, being included as social events. Acceptance for many people with disabilities has been overlooked and overshadowed, and it's due to the fact that our environments and society, attitudinal, the education, again, which we'll talk on later on in the week, that seems to neglect or dismiss people with disabilities in terms of A, having a social life, B, getting from point A to point B respectfully, doing what we want to do on our time. It's almost as if our time doesn't matter because social inclusion for people who require transit need to have their social lives figured out a couple days in advance.
Yeah.
There's no spontaneity to it.
No. And I honestly feel that that accessible transportation, accessible taxis, accessible transit should be. It shouldn't matter whether you're able or disabled. You need to do something. You call. You're able to get done. You're able to get picked up. The needing to plan, at least a day or so ahead of time, and to only have one trip, and to have the same pickup and drop off place. There's just so many extra barriers that are process issues. They're systemic things that it makes it easier for the people in the systems, but it doesn't make it easier on us. These things are system issues, and system issues are not designed to support the people they're serving. They're designed to support the system and the people providing it. And I can't imagine. Okay, so there's 2.6 million of us disabled in Ontario. All of the rest of the people, let's just imagine that we, for 1 month, flip things. So every able person who wanted to arrange a taxi actually had to do that a day or two ahead of time. Like, if we put all of the system barriers, the process barriers that we have on everyone else, like, you'd have bloody war. Nobody would accept that. So why do we have to accept that? Why do we need to accept these system problems? Why doesn't the system work for us? Like it should be a client process, not a system process.
I was in a sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was in a webinar last week, and I saw this really interesting example about a person. I'm not going to name any names for privacy reasons. That they use a mobility device, and they were there with some friends and thought about it. What would it be like? Because they were at a business meeting. What would it be like to stack the chairs that surrounded the table, and when the rest of the attendees came, would be like, what's going on? So then this person who used the mobility device would be there and be like, is there something wrong? Do you need an accommodation? Well, yeah, you do need the accommodation in the form of the chair. Well, this person who had the mobility device didn't need the accommodation. They were ready to go. So that's kind of putting into perspective of the simplest things that we can do to include everybody in the big picture, include everybody long term, include everybody in a sustainable way that has everybody's best interest front of mind. So it's something that it boggles my mind, Maddie.
Just imagine for just a minute. Imagine for a moment that for 1 month, everything on TV was no sound, no captions, just sign language. Period. It's the flip,
Exactly. Just imagine in a hypothetical state that certain things were a certain way, and then the majority of the population who doesn't see through the lens that we see is impacted. I mean, COVID is a huge example of it. I mean, what was it like for you, Maddie, in terms of social inclusion pre-COVID, COVID, and when we get to it post-COVID?
Sure. So pre-COVID, okay. So I had my car accident in June of 2020. So right 2 months after COVID hit. We were just allowed to go pick up food at restaurants, and so I went and picked up food and got hit on the way back, and life changed. But before that, okay, so I can talk about it from I'll talk about it from a mobility perspective, because I was in a cane. So the ramps, the really, really long ramps that go up one way, stop, and then go up another way, they are okay for people in motorized wheelchairs. They're a little long and challenging for people in manual wheelchairs. If you're with a cane, and that's your mobility issue is distance, and steps are difficult, really long ramps are really, really challenging. Going up really long ramps is really, really challenging. So I experienced that quite often. But I also experienced, pre-COVID, a lot of places just have a lot of sensory overload. Like they're too loud, or they're this particular type. I mean, I hear every noise. I hear every electrical signal. So sounds can really really irritate me. And the life-changing thing happened in July 2020 is when my sister let me try on her AirPod Pros, which had noise canceling, and it's like all of my sudden it cut off most of the noises that just seriously drove me quite badly. And I really wish I had them in school, because I don't know how many times I would cower with noise. But anyways, so pre-COVID, it was challenging to participate in some things. It was challenging to get to things. I actually find, I could drive, so I can get myself to things. So transportation wasn't my issue. But when I was walking, I didn't walk a lot. I didn't go out a lot because many of the I couldn't go out in the wintertime because I would feel too unstable. Because snow removal on sidewalks. I still don't. I still don't go out much in the wintertime because my wheelchair likes to do spins, and it's not fun. Fortunately, this year we didn't get that much so I did it. I did able to get way more than I thought I would. But yeah, it's really weird. Like my life before COVID is so different than my life in and now. Um, different issues. But and one of the things that I did notice in the last 4 years, I used to go to Pride events, and some of them just aren't accessible. You go to some some venues for concerts and things. Many of them not accessible. I mean, I had a girlfriend who was in a wheelchair, for 4 years, so I experienced her issues as well, which now are mine. Actually, this her wheelchair is now mine because she gave it to me, which is very funny. She got a new one. Um, we were really good friends.
Oh, the puns already. Okay.
Oh, I know. So I mean, it's really weird for me because my life and health issues were very different, but I definitely did experience a lot of barriers to participating. I made them work, but they were hard to make work. Now those barriers are just phenomenal. Like they may have been knee high um, before COVID. Now they're now they're to the point where people can't see me when I go to a counter. That's how high they are.
Yeah. Well, or they see the top of your head, and
Exactly.
it's
You think
like
I'm a
it's
kid.
like they're playing whack-a-mole, with your head. Is your head just pops up? That's I've had that
Yeah.
conversation with people in my environment as well. It's they just see the top of your head, or
Yeah.
when you're going at an event and you're speaking, and they have a
Yeah.
podium set up that doesn't have uh, an elevation system to it, or lowering system to it. So when you try to speak, you have the microphone that doesn't necessarily contour to where you need it to, and it looks
Yeah.
like you have an extra mustache. But but that's neither here nor there. Maddie, any final thoughts on the conversation today?
Yeah. So we really need we need to think about our how the onus on social inclusion can't be on us, the disabled, because we have no control of the environments we're in. But people who aren't disabled, people who are the decision makers, people who are the business owners, people who are running programs, running events, think through when you're trying to find a place to host something. Can what is the transit and what is the accessibility for getting there, and then at your place, how can we get in, how you can make it easiest so that we're able to get in, but we're also able to get in with other people. And then in the venue itself, look around. How are the washrooms? How are where's where's the check-in, where can we be that we're participating and not just to the side. you know think through, and if you're not sure, ask. There's 2.6 million of us in the province. I'm sure you could find a few.
Absolutely, Maddie. Once again, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining, and we will be back tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m. I believe it is. Yeah,
Yes.
let's go with that. Updates on Facebook and our social medias. Until then, we'll see you guys next time. See you guys.